I have to say they're always working. You know, I stay with them sometimes, and it's like they are always on the job. There's no rest. There's no vacation. They are at it, and so their dedication to the spiritual transformation is beyond anything I've seen. So I'm always happy to do events with them. And we were on a book tour in California last year where we went to 6 cities. People just loved it, and them. And thanks for being here. And the focus today could be on the extraterrestrials and where we're going with it, but it also could be grounded also in some of the ancient civilization stuff. So
right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Thanks.
both of you.
So we just did a talk actually with Eric von Daniken and Konstantin Karakov, and Dr. Sam was supposed to be there from the Bosnian pyramids, but actually he wasn't doing so well health-wise, and it's hard to travel around Europe. But you know, it's interesting. The conclusion of all this is, say the Great Pyramid, for example, you know, that's a structure which I would argue we can't really build exactly today. It would take forever to do that. And it's not just putting a stone upon a stone upon a stone upon a stone. It's the small little air shafts that are inside. We call them star shafts. I mean, there's 4 of them, and there's the relieving chambers, and there's all this other scenario that's going on. So really, you know, who built them? How did this technology get there? And even if we built them, who gave us the technology? I think that's the interesting point, because, you know, we certainly weren't hunter and gatherers building that. The Japanese tried it in the 70s. We have this on YouTube from the Nippon Corporation, and they couldn't get, you know, higher than 40 feet practically, and it was just horrendous, and that was just block upon block.
We were there with cameras in 1978, and we just captured this amazing film of the Japanese trying to use traditional methods to create a 60-meter pyramid. They couldn't do it. They couldn't do it.
They used jackhammers, helicopters, everything, and then they still couldn't do it. So I don't think we've come that far.
I just want to jump in because there's something that came up on the ancient history panel, was that these legacies are living connections and stones to our past. They're actually not just past structures, they're present structures that deliver a whole body of knowledge within their architecture. So talk about that, you guys, like how we're not looking at something from an ancient civilization, we're looking at something that has a modern contemporary influence on consciousness.
Right, so there's many aspects, but the first thing I want to say about the star shafts is Dr. Hurtak's book, The Keys of Enoch, was really one of the first to show that one of the star shafts actually point directly to Orion.
And the 3 stars in the belt.
And the one below it, which is the Queen's star shaft, I'll call them star shafts, some people call them air shafts, point to Sirius. So these are very specific scenarios, which he came out with first, but then people have confirmed that. Now, let's jump over, and I want to include the Americas quite a bit today, because that's amazing. This is like news is coming out all the time. There was just something in New Mexico about ancient footprints. But one of the main things is the Lakota people. As you know, the Lakota are very sacred, and they have something called Te-ya-ni, and it's a bird or an animal, and the center is Orion, one side is Sirius, and the other side is the Pleiades. I mean, why did people on 2 sides of the planet all understand the power of these stellar systems? We believe that that's where a lot of the intelligence came from.
So it means that if we go back in early history, at least 6,000, maybe even 10,000 years before present, there was a mathematical consensus and astrophysical knowledge that navigational cultures carried around the world, from Japan and China all the way to the Americas. So this is very profound. As we push back the envelope of history, we are discovering the wisdom keepers that our ancestors drew from. We're quite aware that we were in a living universe.
We're coming full circle now back to the time where the importance of these star cultures are starting to make more of an impact. So what the ancients knew about the Pleiades, Sirius, Orion, is now influencing us now and coming into the mainstream culture. So this is the importance of your work. And as you open up greater cosmology. Talk about that greater cosmology.
Well, I just want to say a few more things. Like the Mayan culture, for example, they honored, according to Linda Shelley, the god of the maize god, and they saw him like the Egyptians saw Osiris connected with Orion. They saw the maize god connected with Orion. But they also acknowledged the Pleiades, and the Aztecs, when they were in the central part of the country, they saw every 52 years, they looked forward to the Pleiades coming again and centering over some of their temples, because that meant a new year or life would continue. So these star constellations are all over the place. And what's really interesting is they're starting to find that the like Chichen Itza, the pyramid there, it's not that old. But when you go further down to Tikal, they're starting to find these places in and around Puebla, which is really where the largest pyramid is, called Cholula, that these places are extremely old. They're starting to find evidence of 15,000 to 30,000 years ago that people had been in these areas. So we're talking about a whole nother civilization.
And what is astonishing, Desiree and I have used computers to study the musical frequencies inside the interior of the pyramids in Egypt and also in Latin America, and they both are centered with the frequency of the Earth's rotation, F sharp.
And also with a way to put like the consciousness into, I would call an alpha state, which is really a meditative state. So they understood sound frequencies as part of their whole culture.
So the pyramids are also future artifacts. They point to the future developments of where we will be able to entrain our technology in the direction of the Pleiades and Orion, and perhaps with the cosmic cultures coming from these regions in the local universe. So it's amazing to see mathematical, musical, linguistic, and architectural principles that are shared throughout the world at different periods of time, but all major traditions recognize the pyramid as a type of prism for levels of knowledge and mental/spiritual philosophy that brings humanity together around a singular Mother Earth planet.
Yeah, Brendon.
Yeah. This is getting I'm putting all this together in my mind, and again, it's fascinating, and even just with taking everything that we've talked about so far, for me, the question that really sparks my curiosity is to really just be able to ask you here for a little bit of your wisdom to help us get more clarity on where are we right now? Like what is the story today? What is our relationship with these beings? The history, it's there to be able to give us clues, but like where are we currently? And this is where, it's coming into a lot of the other discussions we're having here, which is about like the personal experience and what are we doing with this wisdom? How is it applicable today? How is it showing up in culture? How is it leading us back to spirit? How is it leading us back to simpler times as well? So yeah, I'm curious if you, from your own feeling, your own experiences, your own perspective, where do you feel the story is right now in terms specifically, we'll start here, between us as humans and our relationship with these EBEs, these multidimensional beings? What does it look like from their perspective is more or less what I'm saying, if that makes sense.
Well, let's just take it from the ground up instead. Al Gore, when he did The Inconvenient Truth, actually talked about the fact that if we didn't get this planet together in a better situation, we're going to have plagues, we're going to have an environmental crises. And this is, Dr. Hurtak had a unique experience in 1973 where he was literally taken off the planet for 2 days and went into higher realms. He didn't just go into extraterrestrial realms, although he went through those areas connected with Orion, and by the way, but into higher multi-dimensional realities. And he saw things, and what he was told, and what many other people have been told since 73, is the fact that this planet is going to go through changes. And, we were given the ability supposedly to be caretakers on Mother Earth, and we've really probably done a lousy job. But regardless of that, the planet does go through cycles. And when we go back to archaeology, we're starting to find, again, as I mentioned, even footprints, human footprints that look just like yours or mine in New Mexico, going back 15,000, maybe even 30,000 years ago. There was a young female archaeologist working in Puebla, Mexico, and she said back in I think it was the 70s even, that, she's seeing evidence of people 30 to 50,000 years ago. They totally, crucified her basically, and they threw her out.
She was from Harvard University and she lost her position.
But she was right. I mean, this planet has gone through serious changes in the past. We see the little changes going in the Mayan culture. In fact, it wasn't the Spaniards. Anyone who does the archaeology now will tell you it wasn't the Spaniards that knocked down the Mayan culture. It was actually climate change. They went from having sufficient rainfall to down to about 20 or 30% of their normal rainfall. They may have had as many as 2 million to 5 million. Some people even go as high as 10 million Mayans at one time around the time of Christ. So we're talking 2,000 years ago. Right now, even North America is going back easily 3,000 to even 7,000 years ago of people living here.
The bottom line is we're moving beyond the paradigm of materialism to realizing that we have a consciousness that's fantastic, that's local as well as non-local. We are here, we gather information, but we can also project through intention and, should we say, higher consciousness overlays of information.
Yeah.
Well, I want to jump in on that for a second. Okay. The fact that we are vibrating at a different frequency than we were even 10 years ago. There's a acceleration, maybe of the Schumann resonance, maybe of this the planetary space we're in, and that is bringing us closer to the unseen worlds. Some people call them paranormal. I just call them higher energy beings. We are starting to bridge the veil. The veil.
Exactly.
Between, right. And Alan, you were with us a couple of years in Tucson when they had this conference called The Science of Consciousness. This speaks volumes that the scientific community is shifting beyond the materialistic paradigm to realize that we are consciousness beings living in a living, thinking universe, and we're beginning to take baby steps towards new reconciliation.
Well, that's what this conference has been about, is about consciousness, really. The last 3 days, 3.5 days, Omar just did a great overview about the levels of consciousness. So if we can focus on what is this thing called consciousness? How is it multidimensional? How is it non-local? How do we connect to those other beings? We're going to take a big step for humanity.
Well, let me just go back to what you were saying, and I know you've spent time with us also in Sedona, which is where our office is currently right now. And many people feel there's a great awakening coming, and that people right now that they're experiencing, they're getting more in tune with their, we call it the over self, their higher self. That veil is being lifted. They're actually having what they feel is like higher communication with beings. Now, we don't consider these just extraterrestrial beings. We consider extraterrestrials not that much different from who we are. They just live in different planetary systems. Some of them are sufficiently more advanced consciously. They use telepathic communication most of the time. But in some cases, they need us, we don't need them. So there's different aspects of that. Many of course, are here to help and help us go through the transitions that we're looking at. But then, as you know, Alan, we consider there's also extracelestial.
Yeah, let's talk about, define that, extraterrestrials and ultra-terrestrials. Define.
Well, first of all, let's go back to your question on consciousness. Consciousness is no longer thought of as the flow of sodium ions through the neurological apparatus we call our brain. Consciousness is everything in terms of the reflective aspects of intelligence and beyond. The greatest breakthrough since the splitting of the atom through SRI scientists, Stanford Research Institute scientists, was the realization through very specific tests by the best physicists in America that we have the ability to reach out around the world with the power of the mind.
Right, so consciousness is really a field that we tap into. Now, what aspect that we tap into is really up to us. So there is this universal mind field. It's much more, people think about consciousness and I say it's a field, everyone's like seeing it around the earth and I'm putting some energy out and someone else is putting energy out, I can pick it up, but it's much greater than that. And I think Ingo Swann, when he looked at the planet Jupiter and saw things like a ring before our probes got up there and the type of atmosphere that was there, all of the above, he was 100% accurate remote viewing to Jupiter. I mean, so there's
before the NASA probe got there, he was part of the SRI group, and this is detailed in our book, Mind Dynamics in Space and Time. And so just as we've gone through evolutionary stages of the physical and the mental, we're reaching a whole new threshold of consciousness, what is all about the dynamic that brings minds together collectively and possibly opens the door for what we will call celestial communication.
The non-locality, Brendon, of our human capacity is coming online. I think
Right. So
that-
non-locality means that we can connect instantaneously with any space around us. I mean, not just somewhere in Egypt or somewhere in Russia or whatever, which is what some of the experiments were about, but actually with beings in other realities. So our consciousness for the most part, and that's what Making Contact, Alan, is all about, which is your book. It's showing the fact that once you even see a UFO, you don't even have to see the being in the UFO. You just have like a connection with the UFO. That consciousness is prevalent all the time. You have that connectedness. You're entangled with that reality.
And to use your expression, Alan, we have consciousness, awareness now that we can see not only around the world, but under the ground. This was the basis of our discovery of the tomb of Osiris, as illustrated in my book. Giza's industrial complex, showing that you don't have to have bricks and stones to penetrate space and time realities. It means there's no barrier that cannot be crossed by consciousness, no secrecy that can be put under lock and key. Everything is available in a certain frequency of the mind. Now you take this and you take it to a quantum level, you begin to understand how these vehicles from other cosmic civilizations work. They work through consciousness projection or telepathic communication.
And you begin to see extra celestial levels of intelligence, which are beyond the extraterrestrial.
They've mastered technology and they've gone beyond.
Yeah, exactly.
So Brendon, jump in because we'll just keep talking.
It's fascinating to listen to, and I don't mind at all. One thing that just comes to mind there when we start talking about, again, like the extra celestials and everything. I love the idea of the stories that we hear about like the crafts that they themselves are a being, like the crafts have consciousness. And there's one story in particular, and I actually wanted to see if you guys have come across this or have heard of something similar. And this is drawing from a friend of mine who has had this experience through Dreamtime, where basically it's a craft specifically known as a void hawk. And the craft itself is like a conscious entity. And apparently it like bonds itself with like a human or whatever being, like since it like bonds almost like since birth. And like this human will be here on the planet, but then like this craft, it can like, and it's not always a human, it could be from some other planet. But then the craft is kind of like a multi-dimensional craft and everything like that. But I'm curious, have you ever heard of a void hawk? Has that ever crossed your radar? Or something similar, at least?
Maybe not that term, but you know, you're talking about, if you talk about an extraterrestrial craft, I mean, the pilot, and you see this at Stargate, you know, like there's only certain guys that can like tune in to that exact frequency of the spacecraft. And really, I mean, there is no put buttons and pushing. It's all with the power of the mind. And also, they have to harmonize.
These crafts are alive. If you look at some of the people who have had experiences, they've been aboard, and there's actually living material that is an extension of the brain in a sense. So
well, here's a picture of a vehicle that looks like a bird.
Wait,
we captured on top of a mountain.
Put it closer to the camera, JJ. We had a group of geologists exploring an extraterrestrial site, and suddenly this bird-like vehicle manifested, and out of it came the outline of a human form. So, I mean, these are sensible individuals, engineers, academics, scientists who are looking, as it were, beyond the paradigm that interdimensional realities do exist and can communicate and take on the symbolism of what we find in the shamanistic cultures.
But as we want to move forward also with the idea of extra celestials, which are beyond the nuts and bolts of extraterrestrials, even though extraterrestrials can also operate in the fifth dimension, which means they can go through walls, the other vehicles, and even those connected with what we call the ultra terrestrials, which are beings that don't have any physical form, they're all light energy forms, and these are just different frequencies of beings of existence, literally. You know, they travel in what has been more commonly called, and the Keys of Enoch also mention it, is the Merkabah Vehicle. And of course, people always look at the sacred geometries of them, and that's true, they are sacred geometry, but they can also be, like, you can create your own Merkabah Vehicle in a certain sense, and in a certain part you resonate into that takes you into higher dimensional realities. And I think it works. I mean, it's been talked about from ancient times.
The Tibetan mystics in particular, the Kabbalists, mystical schools have all put people into situations of many years of preparation. But we're saying now the game has changed. We're suddenly realizing that cosmic intelligence is on our doorstep. They're feeding us mental visions, or what we will call geometries, which we can then use to calibrate new directions of science and spirituality.
And they're really trying to help us. Go ahead, Alan.
Well, the question from actually Neil is, how do we connect to these beings, open up our frequencies? And, you know, part of it is what I wrote about in this book. It's the idea that we are connected already to the cosmos. We're not a freak of nature. Life is abundant throughout creation. We are of the cosmos. So, Brendon, I'm sure can you respond to that too?
Yeah, well, and this actually does lead me into a question I would have for you, where for everyone here, if we could kind of again use this opportunity to discuss the kind of like practice visioning, you know, what's ahead of us, what does the future look like? I'm really curious as to, like, you know, like, what do you think this relationship between ourselves and the extraterrestrials and extracelestials and ultracelestials, like, you know, like, what is our relationship going to look like them potentially over the next, like, even just like 5 years, so to speak, you know, because this is something that for me gets very curious. And I know it's a lot through dream space, but at the same time, it's like, you know, this is where it even ties in for me, where it ties in with this idea of, like, you know, and I'll just put this here, just give a full scope of, you know, whether we're referring to it as like hollow earth or other dimensions in general. But it seems to me in my heart that there's like this idea that there's like these actual beings that exist in this realm, and they're like slowly building this relationship. So the relationship is the key. So therefore I'm like, what is that relationship going to look like? How do we develop it on our end? How do we continue to be good ambassadors for it? And that's what I'm basically doing. Like, for me, I'm just like, I'm just going to keep doing a good ambassador, but at the same time, like, you know, how is that relationship going to evolve? And at what point, this is again where it gets theoretical, at what point does that relationship get to the point where, you know, it's a sci-fi movie and we're literally seeing them face to face and we're on their craft and maybe we're going to Hollow Earth with them or something like that? Like, that's, I'm curious, do you see it in a projection that looks like that, or what does a projection look like for you?
I like what you're saying. You know, we are growing up in a vast and awesome universe, and we're recognizing that we need a positive psychology and sociology if we're going to make it beyond the negative social media and even the major media that feeds us stories of frustration, negativity, and certainly the death of civilization as we define it. As a futurist, Desiree and I believe that we're pushing the envelope very carefully. We need a space law, but we also need a positive psychology with respect to making contact with the gifts of the what I would call the divine spark, or the creative aspect of consciousness within us. Until we establish that, we can't look at all of these projects because they're too vast and too enormous for world civilization. But through the internet, we can educate through a university without walls approach.
Right, and I just want to say, I think it's very important. I often say this to people, especially on extraterrestrial topics, that don't feel we're like what Stephen Hawking said, you know, when the ETs, Portuguese or the Spanish landed, you know, they took over the cultures of the Mayans and the Aztecs because, you know, they were so much more sophisticated. I'm trying to empower people to say, hey, we're an Adamic species. We exist throughout the universe. As you know, we've been quarantined down here. We always said we've been quarantined, and now people know what that means. But anyway, that, you know, but basically we have the same telepathic information and connection to other realities than any of the extraterrestrials do. So we really should meet them on a face-to-face
and even more so in a sense, because we're also connected to the angelic realm. Someone asked a question about love and consciousness and time. It is through this immense love, that the capacity that human beings have, that connect us through those dimensions in ways that some ETs don't have. Would you agree, JJ?
Right. I would say love and intention to help humanity, and intention to do more than just do things for yourself. Once you start opening to one, you have to have the possibility. This is in our book, Over Self Awakening, which is really, because basically we have this higher self that we're also disconnected from until we understand it. But basically we have to first accept the fact that these other realities exist. And second of all, we have to then put out the right intention. The intention has to be, you know, yes, I'm willing to help humanity to do the best I can. You do those two things, life changes, really, if you're open to those realities.
The spark plug is co-creation. When we realize we're not alone in the universe, we realize, visualize, and even experience other realities, we begin to build up within ourselves a ability of an outreach program. And that outreach program cannot come, in our logic, through simply the military or economic or technical elites. It must come from humanity as a large. waking up to its divine spark.
And, we don't I was going to say, we don't have to wait for a future time. Brandon keeps mentioning that. I mean, yes, there's going to be a future time when everyone knows extraterrestrials exist. Everyone knows angelic, higher, ultra-terrestrial beings exist. But basically, we can connect with them right now. And many people around the world, as Alan said, are having this great awakening.
Right. So it's about being ensouled beings, realizing that our soul is infinite. This is what Marguerite was saying in the last lecture, that we are ensouled. So in a sense, there's no beings that greater than us. They may be more intelligent, more technically advanced, but on that kind of essence level, we can meet these beings on an even playing field and not be afraid, not worship them, but exchange knowledge as true citizens of the cosmos. This is what we're coming into. So
cosmic citizenship.
Yes.
So again, we're very close to what I believe is recognition by other governments and other independent researchers of the fact that there's many categories we can connect with, but we should reach those who take the higher path of service to all humanity. Those who are willing to put science on exhibit for all cultures and all traditions, and those who are willing to work really with the meek and the humble that have been excluded traditionally by the technical elites.
And if you think about it, if the consciousness is really a field, it's a universal mind. So what are you putting into the consciousness? Are you putting negative thoughts, violence, hatred, anger, separation, or are you putting in positive thinking, saying, I want to help, I want to do more? And then levels of reality go way beyond. It's a universal mind. Literally, you can get into the highest levels, and we'll talk about God levels as well, or we'll say, avatar levels, highest levels of reality. We think there's at least, Dr. Hurtak writes about 24 dimensions in this sun universe, which connected with us. And then others say these beings are not necessarily just on another dimension. They can actually just be in a shifted reality from us, and they can materialize. And I want to say one other important thing that I always say in lectures. It's very important when you are thinking about, say, beings on a 8th or 10th dimension, or even in prayer meditation, they're not having to leave where they are to come to you. When you understand non-locality and entanglement, they literally project themselves so they can materialize to 100 people or 1,000 people like Kuan Yin simultaneously. That's how their minds operate. They just need to project who they are to where you are. So, don't feel you're ever disturbing the higher dimensions.
So what I've discovered, Brenda, and then jump in after this, is that if we really knew how to operate consciousness based on some of the laws of quantum physics that have not been put into application by us humans, we are functioning under laws of physics developed by Newton in the 1600s. That's 400 years old. If we could elevate our awareness to realize that nothing happens without consciousness, this is the core of quantum physics, we'll be able to fundamentally create new programs for our interactions with vehicles and time space and meet these beings on an even playing field. So Brendon, back to you.
Sure. I'll just jump in for a moment. So again, just even going back to some of the things we were talking about earlier, and just to share a little bit more about my perception on how I see things. One of the things that really inspire me, again, with this relationship that we're building between ourselves and again, the ETs, the EBEs, the OUs, the other us's, as I usually call them, within this, for me, what's fascinating about this is that, like, this relationship, why do we feel called towards it? And I think the empowering perspective is just to be able to remember that, this relationship isn't necessarily one that we're just pursuing as something to be able to, like, find refuge in, or to be able to, like, save us from our problems or anything like that. But it's a natural calling within our soul, and the process of connecting with these other beings is literally the process of connecting with ourselves. And this is what, again, much of what the Hurtaks talk about, and to really be able to see this, that for me is where this relationship really becomes inspiring, and without having to look towards it in some sort of way where we're expecting them to save us, but to really understand that, on one level, it's very fascinating to think that, their karma, like, they have karma tied to us in some way, like as much as we are ourselves here on the planet, they are still ourselves in that other position. And yet they are learning alongside with us through them interacting, through them assisting, through them witnessing how we are processing and learning and everything. both of us are growing at the same time. It's not like we're literally just growing and they're just, purely just observing. I do feel, and perhaps there could be other perspectives on this, but I do feel that through them building that relationship with us and through us doing things in the ways that we need to do, it's actually like contributing to their growth in some way as well. So that's where, again, for me, I think it is fascinating to know that we are in this age where contact is possible. And yet, as we've been talking about, contact is a very personal thing. Contact is something that I think will appear to people in different ways. For some people, it might be a visual craft in the sky. It might be a CE5 encounter. And again, that's myself. I've had various CE5 encounters. My girlfriend has had a lot of dream experiences. And then in other situations, it's the meditation. It's being able to connect back into the heart space. I think that is the most accessible place. But even still, if you're thinking about it, like it's as much as you're connecting with like these aliens or whoever, what category you're putting them, it's essentially you just connecting with the oversoul, the overmind, it is consciousness itself. So, to be able to see it from this perspective that we are in this age where, contact is possible, but I think this contact, if anything, we should always be curious to be able to reflect on, like, how is this leading me back further to my own heart and thus further towards my own empowerment? Because the aliens, they would never say like, hey, we're going to do the work for you. They're just like, you got this. We believe in you. We're just here to be the mirror to show you. If anything, they're kind of like an older sibling in some way, just kind of like assisting us, but we still have to do it ourselves, right? So I think that's always, and to know that we can do it. I think that's optimistic.
Well, we call them part of the cosmic family. And so where some of us are reconnecting with our cosmic family, which works on many levels, it can be extraterrestrial or ultra-terrestrial. And just to put what you were saying about our higher self in perspective, we have this book, Over Self-Awakening, which you can find on our website, keysofenoch.org. And it kind of talks about this, but we don't believe in reincarnation like we'll say the people, the Hindu tradition say. We feel that the higher self is our reality. And that's kind of what you're saying, Brendon. And then as needed and in the right times, the right places, especially if we have a higher consciousness reality of this, we are brought in to manifest or to be born into the places and the spaces and the times that are needed,
which is biogenesis.
And so that's why it's so exciting to be here now. And everybody, and I want to put this out, I love the fact that, you're a younger person and you see this higher reality. We need to wake up more and more people to the fact that there is a higher reality. So many people think it's only here. And that's the important thing for us about extraterrestrials, to tell people, there is so much more to the universe. There's so much more to the consciousness mind. There's so much more to who each of us are that we really have to cherish it.
And as we vibrate at a higher level, as we are here more for the service of others as opposed to service of self, there's a shift as we make ourselves available to meet these beings. We have to realize there's a consciousness shift. We have to let go of the things that have kept us stuck. Personally, collectively, planetarily, we have to clean up the mess we've made of our planet, which is key to welcoming the others. It's like I often say, you have to clean up your room before you have company. So this is where we're coming into, even though they're here and back, but to really have full on embrace, I think we have to act as responsible beings, citizens, and be grounded in ourselves as divine beings and ready to encounter a greater reality. In my book, Preparing for the New Realities of Extraterrestrial Existence, how do you prepare is by knowing we're part of the cosmos, by dropping into ourselves, by grounding into our own being. It was on the panel last night, we said, find out what your mission is and live that. And this is what we're all doing here. I think Kathleen Martin is coming in soon. Anything to wrap up, JJ, Desiree?
Well, I wanted to point out, because Brandon said some very important things that I agree with. We have a large roadmap, and the problem has been the specialists have been working with what I would call micro intelligence. They've been working with soil conditions on our sister planets. But in many ways, we need a better cosmology of consciousness to see the greater challenge that we're facing.
And just to say to people, don't be afraid to make a change. If you put that energy out like you're really willing to help humanity, and you do it in an honest, heartful, loving way, then the whole energy around you if you're allowing it, will shift completely. I mean, I know people that have been married with kids and all this stuff. The kids were older, but, you know, within saying that in a heartful kind of a meditative state, you know, within 6 months, her job was changed, her husband was changed, and she was back. She was in a foreign country. She was back in the US. So, and with a new boyfriend. So, I mean, her whole life changes. So don't be afraid of the change. In fact, the Hopis say, you know, don't hold on to the shoreline. That's true for all of us going through any of the changes that we're experiencing today. Don't hold on to the old past shoreline. Go with the flow of the river, go with that, and try to tune into the synchronicities in your life that are coming from higher realities.
The cosmic cultures are here. Ingo Swann told me that everything is going to change. I completely agree. All science, spiritual philosophy, evolution and biology is going to change very quickly within this generation. At the same time, we need to be heart-centered in all of this to keep our perspectives alive and positive as much as possible.
Alan, what was it that Colonel Corso said about if you can take it?
It's a new world if you can take it. But thank you, JJ, Desiree. JJ and Desiree and myself are going to be appearing. We're going to do a talk in New York, October 20th. You can email me at newrealities@earthlink.net. We're going to be at the New Life Expo, October 22nd to the 24th in New York City. We're going to be in Florida at the New Life Expo there in Boca, Deerfield. That is January 22nd and 23rd.
And
we're going to be in St.
LA.
Petersburg on Florida, January, was that 13th, 14th, and at the Conscious Life Expo in LA. But if you can't find us anywhere, just buy the book and you get all that. But look for us. You can email me, newrealities@earthlink.net. And they're also going to be on the remote viewing 4-week course. They're going to make a special appearance on one of those weeks. So they are experts in remote viewing. And thank you.
And we're at keysofenoch.org if you're interested. We have many, many books in addition to the Keys of Enoch, as well as music and graphic video for meditation, as Brendon had said.
Everything is vibration.
Yeah.
Choose the positive vibrations and go forward.
So thank you, Neil.
I'll put those dates in the chat here. Brendon, any final words for you? What did you get from it?
I'll just, again, finishing with gratitude and you know, closing thoughts on this. I think for people here, I really encourage them to start opening up to the ways that they can develop this personal relationship with these beings, and to see these beings as kind of, again, like the ambassadors of the bigger you that exists throughout the universe. So as JJ was saying, again, you know, it really is about bringing it back to the heart, and we can keep it that simple. So if you're just like, how do I go contact aliens? It's just like, take care of your body, get some sunlight, go have, like, you know, get out in nature, create some art, meditate, connect with your breath. It really is and always will be those simple things. And to literally, just by listening to discussions like this, opening your mind to the wonder and opening your mind to the infinite possibilities. And then, hey, if you feel called to go out and sit underneath the stars one night and put out that intention, see what happens. But at the very least, you can always do it in dream time. And yeah, just know that whether or not, I think the last thing I'll say is that, you know, for each of us here, I really invite everyone here, this could be a paradigm shifting moment, to just feel it into your soul that if you're here right now, there's a good chance that, like, you already came here to be like an earth ambassador, but you forgot that you were. And now you're going through the process of like remembering. And as soon as you like feel that vibration of that idea, you're like, oh yeah, like that is why I came here. And like, we're already a part of that family, as Desiree was saying as well. So yeah, I just wanted to put out that inspiration out there, and thank you again. It was a wonderful discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.